folks 30 seconds, and then we will dive right in.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today. Thank you, Alex, for coming on. Very, very special guest. Very timely topic, or it will be even more timely coming up. But I will not spoil any of the deadlines or any of the upcoming things to be aware of. I think Alex is definitely the expert there. I'm looking. We really do have a truly global audience today. I can see folks tuning in from all over the world. I'm on the East Coast. I believe Alex is in Central Time in Denver. Is that right?
It's actually Mountain Time.
Mountain Time. Okay.
MST. Yeah.
MST. Cool. So yeah, we really are all over it. We have a pretty sweet, if I might say, set of questions lined up today on a topic which is what I would say the single most asked topic of questions that we get. And I'm sure Alex gets these all day. He's the expert here. But today we have a special session set up on US taxes, US taxes 101. And what we've done is thank you everyone for sending in questions before this webinar, before this masterclass. Alex is going to run through these. We even have collected questions from the community. But what we definitely want to do as well is save about 15, 30 minutes towards the end for live Q&A. There are always many questions that do pop up. With that being said, please feel free to, in the chat, ask any questions that you might have. We'll be noting them down, and when it comes to live Q&A, we'll jump into them. But without further ado, Alex, why don't we start with, if you could do a very brief personal introduction on yourself and your company, we'll go from there, and then we'll start diving into questions.
All right. Arjun, thanks a lot. And you and I have worked together for quite some time now, and it's been a great relationship. Anyway, so to introduce myself, my name is Alex Oware. I'm a CPA licensed in Massachusetts and Colorado. I'm also one of the members in the National Association of Black CPAs over here. And I started my business, this business 10 years ago. And when I started on a platform called Upwork. And it looks like, the kind of clients that I get on Upwork were international clients, and most of them comes in with a lot of problems, and maybe it's a notice of penalty and stuff like that. My focus was my main goal going into accounting and taxes was to focus on US taxpayers, but I began to see the problems that foreigners are having in terms of navigating the tax system, and so my focus basically shifted immediately to that area just to help them more. So I've been able to, I've focused on helping foreigners, foreign persons and foreign corporations from all over the world to really understand the US tax system for the past 10 years and, talk about everything. I file taxes, I give consultation advice. I represent foreign taxpayers that have penalty notices and stuff like that. And, we are usually very successful in most of them, but some cases may be different. But yes, so I have a degree in accounting, master's degree in accounting. I have a CPA license, as I've said earlier. I'm actually in my third year in law school. And so that's just about me, so I also deal with US taxpayers too, but majority, I would say 90% of my client base is foreigners.
Wow. So you said you're actually currently in law school right now. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. I'm in Purdue Law School.
Wow.
I'm in my third year right now. Yeah.
Well, I maybe a whole separate question is how you manage your time we're running the full business and also doing law school. That's impressive. But as Alex mentioned, it sounds like you obviously serve customers, companies globally, and that's the same for us at Doola. We serve customers globally. We help folks form a US entity, whether they live in the US or they're abroad, but definitely most of our customers are international or based outside the US. And one of the most common questions we get is, even before starting, what are taxes? What do I do with taxes? What do I have to know for taxes? So why don't we start with actually maybe most common question you might get too, but could you actually just take us through the step-by-step process for filing taxes for a US LLC owner? And why don't we start with non-US residents, which it seems to be the majority of the business.
Okay, sure. And I can address US persons, but it all depends on the focus of the question. So when you talk about foreign persons, it all depends on whether they are filing in their own capacity as an individual, or they have an LLC, or they have a corporation or partnership, okay? So if you are filing, for people that are filing, in their own personal capacity or through a single member LLC, usually your deadline is going to be April 15, right? But if you're living abroad, it's usually July, I think it's July 15 for persons. If you're a single member LLC and you're supposed to file the 1120 and the 5472, that does not have that July 15, that June 15. I think I need to check between July 15 and June 15 because there's a little bit of complication there. So for LLCs, let's dwell on LLCs. For LLCs, if it's a single member LLC, okay, and regardless if you're conducting trade or business or you don't have any trade or business, you need to focus on the LLC first, okay? The LLC files an 1120 and 5472 on April 15 every year, on or before April 15. So you can start somewhere in February or, February or March, that's fine. But you need to file the tax return by April 15. And if you cannot do it by April 15, you need to request for extension before or on April 15. And that gives you 6 months, takes you to October 15, and then you file your tax return, okay? Now, let's get back to the individuals. If you're trying to file a tax return, and if you're non-resident alien and you're not here and you have a tax filing obligation, you could actually stick with the April 15, or you could use the June 15, okay? June 15, I think, is the correct date, but you guys can spot check on me as you're online and Google it, because I have a whole lot of things running through my mind. And then if you have a corporation is April 15, okay? A corporation will file April 15. It's the same as the single member LLC filing deadline. And so if your corporation is not ready to file a tax return on April 15, you need to seek an extension, 6 months extension, and that takes you to October 15 to file the returns, okay? And then we come to flow-through entities like partnerships, multiple member LLCs. Those are March 15. So on March 15, you need to make sure you file all of your returns. And if your statement and everything is financial statement and things are not ready to file, then you can request for 6 months extension, which takes you to September 15 for you to file.
Got it. So I think if I'm hearing things here, there's some key takeaways are, depending on if you're filing in an individual capacity and the type of entity you have, the exact date and the exact filings are different, which makes a ton of sense there.
That's correct. Yes.
Got it. And then could you quickly touch on the step-by-step process for filing taxes for US resident-based LLC owners?
Okay. So you're talking about US residents, right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So a lot of the time, I would say this is a step. If you're a US person, this is the steps you need to take. First of all, before you approach a tax preparer or a CPA or a tax attorney to file your taxes for you, you must have a complete set of books. And when I talk about complete set of books, that is your financial statement with properly prepared profit and loss and balance sheet. Okay. And before that, that's the first thing you need to do before you even approach your tax preparer. And so when you approach them, they will sometimes give you a tax organizer to ask you a few questions about you and your company and the people who are involved in the company. And once that tax organizer is prepared, they're going to charge you for whatever the tax preparation fee is. So they would take the completed organizer, and then they would also take your financial statement, and then they start preparing the return. Okay. Now, once the return is, during the course of preparing the return, there may be questions coming back to you back and forth to get more clarification on certain things. But if everything goes smoothly, the return will be drafted, and usually it has to be sent back to you. The return will be sent back to you for you to review and make sure everything checks out right. Now, we do this because you will be responsible for whatever happens with the return after it's filed, okay? So it's very important that when the return is pushed back to you, you ask questions on, what things you don't understand, okay? And then also when you're asking questions, do not be sending emails. You send one email and then you follow up with another email and do that. Don't do that. Put all of your questions together, okay, in one email and then send everything. That's the best way you can have a good relationship with your CPA or your tax attorney or tax preparer. So once you have the form, review it, check to see everything is correct. And if everything is good, your CPA or attorney or tax preparer would give you instructions. If you want to mail it, you can mail it. If you want to e-file it, there's a form you can sign to e-file it, and the person that's doing the tax return for you will file it for you. So those are the steps, to doing the return. And I think that the most important thing for most business owners, whether you're a foreign person or US person, is to have a proper set of financial statements going to a tax preparer.
Well, this is actually the second question we get asked all the time, which you mentioned already, but I'm going to ask it right now. What is the step-by-step process for setting up a proper set of books as an LLC owner?
All right. So yeah, that's a good question. Well, there are so many accounting softwares out there. Okay. There is Xero, there is QuickBooks. For me, I do a lot with QuickBooks, but whatever works for any of the business owners, they can use it. But the first thing is, after you've set up your company and then gotten your bank account, you can actually start setting up your QuickBooks or your accounting system. And then whatever transaction that comes in, you can integrate your bank account and everything. So for most of the people I deal with, they have things like they have bank accounts with Brex, or Mercury or stuff like that. You can quickly integrate it into QuickBooks, and the transaction comes in on a daily basis. So you could even make it a chore to, whenever you get up in the morning, go into your QuickBooks and check, if money has come in, if QuickBooks is reporting maybe $100 paid to StartPack, you ask yourself, what kind of expense is StartPack? Maybe it's legal and professional. Then you basically categorize it as legal and professional, and then you move on. But the trend we're seeing is a lot of people pile up all of this information. They wait till the end of the year to approach a tax preparer, and that's not good. So this should be a daily, and if you make it a daily process or even weekly or monthly process, it becomes easy during tax time, on everything that you need to do, right? So, the first step of the process, get an accounting software going, get QuickBooks or Xero. And if you don't have you don't have money for accounting software, or you cannot pay the monthly subscription, you could actually set up your own spreadsheet or your own Google sheet, and then you record your transaction on a daily basis. Now, the spreadsheet and the Google one, I don't really recommend it because most of the taxpayers that I have seen don't know anything about accounting. And so if you're using spreadsheet and all of that, you have to know what debit and credit is. Where do I debit? Where do I credit? That's not good. But if you use QuickBooks, QuickBooks knows, the debit and the credits and all that you need to do. QuickBooks is not automated. Don't get me wrong. It's not automated. But if you're able to specify where your income and expenses are coming from and going, it would do the proper financial analysis for you.
I love that. Thank you for the overview. One thing I want to reiterate, because I think this applies to doing your books, but also many things, is it can seem incredibly overwhelming to keep a proper set of books. But what you said was make it a weekly or make it a daily process or system. And then that way it's 5 minutes a day. You
Oh
record your
yeah, it doesn't
transactions
take
and
a lot.
tax
It
season
doesn't
comes
take
around
much
and you're
time.
good.
Correct. Yeah.
Love that. Let's zoom out a tiny bit here. I think we've sort of started with here's how to walk through taxes step by step and even keeping a set of books. What would you say are the biggest tax benefits of having an LLC as a non-US resident?
That's a good question, and I get this all the time. Well, the biggest tax benefit all depends on what you're doing, right? I think that the biggest tax benefit for most of my clients is that they don't have to pay taxes, and their filing is so simple and easy. I mean, for us, it's easy to file the 1120 and the 5472s, but if you are a foreign person, I would tell you don't mess with it. But yeah, if you have, sorry, I just got distracted with all these emails coming in. But the thing is, sorry, ask the question. What was the question
Sure.
again? Sorry.
Biggest tax benefits of having an LLC as a non-US resident.
Okay, so the biggest tax benefit is that these people don't have to pay taxes depending on what they're doing. Okay. You only pay taxes in the US if you're considered to be conducting US trade or business, or you have an effectively connected income. So most of the time, the people I see and the fact of their situation shows that they don't even have any connection here. They sit in their foreign country and do all the business, right? And so I think that is the biggest business, the biggest benefit for most foreigners that are setting up LLCs, right? The fact that they don't have to pay taxes. But then every situation is different, and every taxpayer needs to sit with an accountant to analyze whether their situation falls within this general rules that we're talking about, because there are several exceptions that could cause a foreigner to pay taxes, right? So for example, if you're receiving things like dividends, royalties, rents from the US, you may be paying taxes. But then if you're just providing services, you sit in your foreign country and, provide all the services from that foreign country, and you have no connection here in the US, then that income is not taxable, right? And so that is the biggest benefit I see people with LLC as compared to corporations. So you put two people on the same platform who are doing the same thing, two foreign persons doing the same thing, consulting. You have one who has set up a corporation doing the consulting, and then you have one doing it through a single member LLC. The tax implication is different. It's like day and night. With a corporation doing the same thing, it gets taxed 21%. And the corporate, when you take money out of the corporation and it's structured as dividend, you also pay withholding taxes on the dividend. Let's get back to the LLC. If you have the LLC doing the same thing, the LLC doesn't pay taxes because, it's a disregarded entity and all the income basically flows through the owner. So we kind of put the LLC aside. We are like, this LLC doesn't mean anything to us. We look at the owner and then when we look at the owner, we ask the owner, what are you doing? The owner says, oh, I'm consulting. I'm, building website for people. And, I sit in my country, India or China, and to do it. And that's all I do. Okay. So we look at that LLC member situation and we say, okay, based on what you've told me and the fact that you don't have people working for you in the US, or you don't have any offices or anything that connects you to the US, then you don't pay any taxes, zero. Okay. But if you tell me you're a corporation, you're paying taxes on the 21%. It does not matter where the work is being performed. As long as you're using the corporation to sign a contract and the corporation is receiving all the income and everything, yes, you will be taxed on it.
You might have just answered this question, but I'll ask it. Are there any tax loopholes that small businesses or LLC owners can take advantage of?
Yeah, so people say tax loopholes, and sometimes I chuckle because a tax loophole is something that it's legal, it's in the law, but it basically it's basically something that it has unintended consequences. Congress set it up. They didn't know it's going to be like that. And then it turns out that it's benefiting one person versus the other, right? So one of the loopholes I can tell you is, how you set up your entity and who owns the entity, okay? If you set up your entity to be an LLC, you're going to be treated a little bit favorable versus someone that owns a corporation, okay? If you're a US person versus a foreign person, there are different issues here, right? So one would prefer to be, a foreign person that receives foreign source income. And then one will also, a US person cannot get out of that situation because a US person is taxed on worldwide income, okay? So when it comes to a loophole, it's all about, facts and circumstances and how your tax preparer is applying the law, because loopholes are the law. It's not like something that's illegal that someone is trying to circumvent the system. It's basically something that it already exists, but then it's the difference. Like, let's take an example. When you file your tax return and you claim itemized deduction, right? You claim all your mortgage interest and your property taxes and all of that. And I file the same taxes, I claim standard deduction. You probably may get more deduction than me, but why is it so? It's probably because I have not, that could be a loophole for a taxpayer who does not know. If I did not know that I needed to claim an itemized deduction, if it's higher than my standard deduction, and you are claiming standard itemized deduction, means that you know something that I don't know and you're taking advantage of it, right? So, exploring loophole is basically something that it's someone, if someone knows the tax code, we don't even have to worry about the loophole. We just apply the laws as it applies to your situation and then go through that.
I really like the way you define loophole there. It's very true. People hear loophole and they think, ooh, I'm doing something which is maybe illegal, or crap, I hope the IRS doesn't see this. But the way you define it's pretty clear. It's taking the tax code as written and applying it in the most favorable way for you.
Yeah, you apply in a favor. And one loophole I can tell you, everything could be a loophole, like capital gains taxation, right? A foreign person would not be taxed on capital gain. If you own stocks, you sell stocks and you make capital gains, you will not be taxed on it if you've not been in the US for 183 days or more during the year that the stock was sold, right? But a US person will be taxed regardless if they are, they're a US person. A US person can take advantage of that loophole and say, look, I have so many stocks. Maybe I have some stocks. I don't want to sell it now, but I don't want to pay taxes on it either, right? One way they can do that is they could hold on to the stock till they die and then, transfer the stock, or, in their will, they transfer the stock to whoever is going to inherit it. So in that way, you've postponed the taxation and you've even created a step-up basis for the stock, right? So the person that takes it from there doesn't pay taxes on the, on the stocks that they receive as inheritance. If you have so much, wealth, it could be added to your estate and your estate pays taxes on it. But whoever is receiving that, those stocks will not pay taxes on it. Now, another thing is a US person who wants to avoid capital gain taxation could say, look, why don't I renounce my citizenship or permanent residency, so that all these stocks that I have, provided I'm not a covered expatriate, and that's a very complicated situation. But those covered expatriate are those who are, who are worth 2 million or more, or have paid taxes of about 171,000 for the past 5 years and all of that. It takes a lot to be in that situation. So let's just say you're not in a covered expatriate position. but you have some stocks. You want to avoid taxation, capital gain taxation when you sell it. Most people will renounce their citizenship. And then when you renounce it, you become a non-resident. Guess what? When a non-resident sells stocks and get, capital gains, what happens? It's tax-free, right? So assuming they don't stay in the US in 183 days, that's tax-free. So those are some of the loopholes. It's legal, and it's basically how you see it. Yeah.
I'm sure there's many other I can even tell you know many here, and that's the thing. Many people are aware of some of these, aren't aware of some. But yeah, as you put it, I think this is why it's very important to work with a tax professional, because they can help apply the tax code in the most favorable way. Because as everyone listening can tell, this is very dense and a very complex topic.
Right.
Cool. Well, with that in mind, I guess a little follow-up question here. The topic of tax write-offs for your LLC. Can you walk through what a tax write-off is? And if someone has an LLC, what types of things are business expenses and things that you can write off versus things that you can't?
That's a great one. So it's one of, I think it probably should have been the first topic, because that's what gets to lower your taxes, right? Both either in the US or in your home country where you are. But okay, so tax write-off, if we are using the Title 26, which is the Internal Revenue Code, it says that you can write off whatever is ordinary, necessary, and ordinary necessary towards the production of the kind of income you're making. Okay, so if it's ordinary and necessary, then whenever you're spending money, you need to ask yourself, why am I spending this money? What is it for? Right? So if I pay StatPack to set up my LLC for me, then I have to ask myself, what kind of expenses is this? Is this really important for my business? And if it is, if the question is yes, then you can deduct it, right? So we know that it's one of the first things you have to do is to set up your LLC. You have to pay someone to do that. That's ordinary and necessary expenses. And so you can deduct that. Let's say you're paying people from all over the world, maybe paying contractors. The moment you make that payment, ask yourself, why am I making this payment? Okay, to pay these contractors. And what are they going to do? To help my company to succeed, okay? If they're helping your company to succeed, or they're helping your company to basically further whatever cost the company was set up for and to make the kind of income you're making, then it is deductible, okay? Now, there are certain things that you cannot deduct completely. In every general rule, there's an exception. Things like when you buy a car, it can be depreciated, or you could get a Section 179 deduction that you can check into. If you buy meals is 50%, unless the meal is served in the restaurant. When you go and sit in the restaurant and there's business being conducted, then it's 100%. But if you order, take away and, your stuff like that, those are 50% when you're using the US tax code. And entertainment, you entertain people, that is no longer deductible. So we'll give you the general rules, but then we'll carve out exceptions for you, right? But the general rule is that for expenses to be a write-off or deductible, it has to be necessary and ordinary for the kind of work your company is engaging, and it has to also be supporting the kind of income that you're trying to bring in. Even if you don't bring in income and you make losses, it's fine. We know you're trying. The purpose for those expenses is that you're trying to make income, right? So it's fine to make losses, but you need to make sure that what you're doing is ordinary, necessary, and connected to the business as far as producing the income is concerned. And also, I know that most taxpayers I've seen have a tendency of commingling, or using business account for personal expenses. They go on vacation and they swipe. At that point, you need to ask yourself, is this really business or is it really personal, right? So anytime you're spending money is going out, ask yourself why that money is being spent and for what purpose.
I love that definition there. One thing you mentioned actually, which is maybe a whole other topic, but I would love to touch on it here. You mentioned, let's say you're paying a contractor or paying an employee. What about the owner of the LLC? Let's say you are a non-US resident with a US based LLC. How do you pay yourself?
Okay, so it depends. It depends on whether the LLC is a single member or multiple member. Okay, so I will start with single member. With a single member, when we apply the US tax code, and you could also ask, most time when I consult with foreigners, I tell them, look, my job is to do the US side. You need to check with an accountant that also understands the other side of the world, which is where you're located, and ask them how you can do things. But when we apply the US tax code, if you're a single member LLC, disregard it, okay? You cannot pay yourself. Let me rephrase it. You can pay yourself, but the payment you're paying is not deductible. It's not a company expense. We call it distribution or draw, okay? So we see the LLC as the same as you. So whatever you take out of the company belongs to you, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say LLC makes 100,000. After expenses of 50,000, you have 50,000 remaining in the LLC's bank account. That 50,000 belongs to you. You can do whatever you want to do with it. Okay, you can take it out, take it on to vacation, buy some fancy stuff for yourself. That's fine, as long as you pay the taxes on it. That's okay, right? And so you don't have to. There's no crazy way of paying yourself. Once you know your income and your expenses, whatever is remaining is yours. You can take it. Okay. I come across foreigners from certain countries that, they send me messages and it's like, I want to pay myself and I want you to draft some payroll stuff for me or wages or things like that, because maybe they want to show it in their country that that's what they receive, right? You could do that. You could actually invoice yourself, your company, and pay yourself. But when you're doing the US accounting, do not treat it as an expense. You could treat it as, a distribution or draw so that it does not impact, your net profit. Because at the end of the day, your bottom line, income minus expenses, that is your bottom line. That's what belongs to you. Whether you take it out or not, it belongs to you. And that's what you pay taxes on as a disregarded entity. Now, when you take that invoice back to your country, depending on how your country treats the LLC, maybe that invoice will be accepted, okay? And they would say, okay, well, yeah, that's what you received. Because some countries do see US LLCs like it's a corporation. Countries like UK, when you form a US LLC, they see it as a corporation. And so you end up being taxed on the corporate income. If you're doing everything correctly and you're letting the government know that you have a US LLC, yes, they're going to treat you like a corporation. You pay the UK corporate taxes and all of that. And so what you do in your foreign country, I don't know anything about it. But in the US, when you take money out of the US, it's a distribution, right? If it's a single member LLC, it's a distribution or draw. Let's come back to multiple member LLC. Multiple member LLC, you could also do the same thing as a single member because it's also a flow through. You could take distribution, or you and your partner can come into an agreement, put it into the operating agreement and say, look, I'm going to be working for this partnership and I want to be paid for my services. So they would draft an agreement called a guaranteed payment. So you would receive a guaranteed payment for your services, and those will come to you maybe on a regular basis, monthly or quarterly or yearly or whatever it is. Those ones, the company just gives it to you. They transfer it over to your account because it's in the agreement that you need to be paid a certain amount of guaranteed payment. And that guaranteed payment can be deducted on the partnership tax return as legitimate expenses. But when you compare it to a single member LLC, you cannot deduct your distribution or draws that you're taking out from single member LLC.
Wow, very, very thorough answer there. And I think This is where it's tough. Again, it comes back to you can't really expect everyone to know the nuances of this, which is why I think it becomes so important to either do your research from verified sources or have a quick consultation with someone. Even if this is what I tell folks, even if it's a paid consultation, the amount of time and energy and money you'll save down the line is worth it. Just to get a basic understanding of things.
You got it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we have a bunch of questions from the community and Q&A, but before we jump in, why don't we finish off sort of this set of submitted questions with one more, which is, what are the biggest mistakes founders can avoid making before forming an LLC?
I think the biggest mistake is not consulting anyone and just reading from Google or listening to a friend who probably doesn't know anything about US taxes, and because the friend is doing the same thing, they also jump on that same train and do the same thing, right? Before you set up an LLC, you need to have a consultation with someone. And I basically suggest that you pay someone, even if it's 15 minutes or 30 minutes, pay to get good information, because when you're paying, the quality of the information is very qualitative than when you're not paying. But when you're not paying, I don't have to put too much stuff into what I'm telling you. I mean, most of the time, in my profession, because I'm a CPA, whether you pay me or not, I'm supposed to give you the correct, answer. But then when the time is up, it's up. We're not talking anymore. But some people take a passive approach when you don't pay them. Okay, so they don't do research before coming to the meeting, and it just basically tells you whatever. But when you pay them, now it becomes more serious on what they are telling you, and then also you get to know, they get to share more information they want to share with you, because you pay them, so they now care for you, right? So I would say when you're setting up an LLC or you're setting up any company, make sure you know the tax implications before setting it up, because I've seen so many cases where people set it up and it either becomes expensive to maintain, or they didn't know the tax deadline and they start getting penalties, or they set it up and then they have a whole bunch of questions and they realize they did the wrong thing. Okay, so when you want to set up an LLC or a corporation or any kind of entity, you need first-hand consultation to figure out if this is the right thing for you. And for most people that are also setting up US LLCs in general, I would say that don't only talk to a US person, a US advisor. Also talk to an advisor in your country. I understand that some foreign advisors are still confused about how this whole thing works. It's when you talk to them, the information is all over the place. But find someone that's very reputable and knows what they're talking about. Because I'll give you an experience. I have a case where I filed 1120 and 5472 for one client in Russia, and then this guy contacted a Russian accountant and got a whole lot of information that was really bad. And then the guy came out, gave me a bad review, said I messed up everything for him because he was supposed to have paid taxes, and I told him he wasn't required to pay taxes and only required to pay 1120 and 5472. So yeah, a whole lot, and he even requested for his refund, and I'm like, no, you're not getting your refund, and we could go to court about this if you have the resources. But anyway, fast forward to a year after that, he came back, apologizing that he got a wrong advice from his country and he doesn't know what to do now. And at that point, you've basically destroyed the relationship you and I have. So there's not much I can help you. So I basically told him, no, it's fine. I'm fine with everything, but you need an accountant. If you don't trust what we do, right? So yeah, you could get into situations like that where the foreign advisor is not giving the correct advisor, and it also complicates things for us here in the US.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you or that client ever wanted to be in that situation, but I think I hope no one wants to be in that situation unless you really like arguing with folks and creating pain for yourselves. But I genuinely think people don't. But it just goes to highlight, I think, if if he had spoken to you and spoken to a local Russian tax expert before forming, situation could have been avoided.
Well, he did the right thing. He talked to her. I mean,
Yeah.
he talked to someone in Russia, and unfortunately, I don't know. I feel for them. I feel for them. It's really crazy. Yeah.
Well, I guess one of my favorite sayings is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. I think that it's maybe an ounce of prevention when it comes to taxes in your LLC is worth like 2 tons or whatever, some large amount of weight. But the point is just spend some time at the beginning doing a little bit of prep. 15 minutes, paid consultation, 15 minutes, you'll save yourself tons of time and energy going down the line.
You got it.
Sweet. Well, look, we have about 15 minutes here before we wrap up. We have some great questions from the community and from Q&A. Why don't we take a quick pause for 30 seconds? I actually have to grab a laptop charger. We'll be right back, and then we're going to rapid fire through some of these last Q&As. While we're sort of prepping up here, anyone listening right now, please feel free to write in any questions you might have. And then Alex, we're going to rapid fire through these. And then at the end, we'll definitely want to leave folks with a way to find you and reach you, because I think if there's one message here is that people should do the consultation before and chat with someone. So we'll be back in about 30 seconds. Then we'll fire through some of these final questions.
Sounds good.
Cool. Okay, thank you to a couple folks who posted questions in. If anyone has more, please feel free to drop them in. But Alex, we have about a little over 10 minutes here. Let's sort of just rapid fire through some of these. So we'll start with one here. How much tax do I need to pay and what do I need to file if I'm a non-US resident with an LLC set up for a personal blog, or my blog is my business?
It depends. I mean, it depends. Like when we started talking about where the income is sourced, right? If you're a foreign person, you need to ask yourself, are you considered to be engaged in US trade or business? And if you're not, then there's no taxes to pay. So we don't even have to worry about tax rates or anything like that, right? And if you're writing blogs, you're basically providing services. And, whatever money you're making out of the blog is what you get paid for, right? And so, if you don't have any employees in the US, you don't have any exclusive contractors, and exclusive contractors means that persons that have, people that are based here in the US, they don't have any other work to do. The only thing they do is they work for you. Those are exclusive contractors. And if you have an office in the US or warehouse, then we need to start talking about what the US taxes is. But if you have none of this, then we like to save ourselves time. We review all of this upfront, save ourselves time, and not have to talk about other tax issues, right? So if none of this apply, then, the income you're receiving from the blog writing is, basically not taxable in the US. The only thing you need to do is if you are doing it through an LLC, then you file what we call the 1120 and the 5472.
Got it. And I think one caveat here, which is I think goes without saying, but it's important to say, probably every question here starts with and should be said 6 times, it depends, because these are general questions and there's a lot more context which needs to be had. So just mentioning that to folks, that's why it is important to really give full detail in your situation. But Alex, appreciate you still trying to answer these questions. Question here, which you touched on before, but I think it's an important one really quickly. What is the timeline for submissions of different tax returns? So if you could quickly just run through those dates again, which you mentioned earlier.
So since we're talking about LLCs, if you are a person, okay, let's just say you are a foreign person that wants to file your taxes and you're not located in the US, your deadline is June 15. Okay, I just checked, and so it's June 15. Okay, if it's an LLC, the LLC's deadline is on or before April 15. Okay, if you cannot do it on April 15, then you file your extension exactly on April 15. Do not wait until after April 15 to file an extension, because then the extension is useless. Okay, so you need to file the extension on or before April 15, and then it gives you 6 months to do that. And then if you have a corporation, it's still, April 15, on or before April 15. And if you want to file an extension, you do it on or before April 15. If you have a multiple member LLC, it's on or before March 15. If you want to file an extension, it's on or before March 15. Do not wait after March 15 to file it. Otherwise, you get a penalty.
Okay, let me try to recap this. If you're a non-US resident filing June 15th, if you have a US single member LLC on or before April 15th, if you have a multiple member LLC, so a partnership, that would be March 15th. And if you are a corporation, what's the date for that filing?
On or before April 15th. So corporations are persons, so they put them into the same, personal category.
Perfect. Another question here on the topic of, I guess, tax write-offs or deductions or business expenses. What kind of travel expenses am I allowed to deduct, and how do I file them for my business?
Okay, so again, travel expenses, it falls back to the logic we talked about earlier. It must be necessary and ordinary and connected to the kind of business you're doing, right? So whenever you're traveling, ask yourself, why am I traveling? What is this for, right? If it's related to the business, if you're traveling to go meet business partners or business customers, then yes, it's deductible 100%, right? If you are traveling and you're going to be, let's say you're traveling for 6 days, 3 days of it, you're going to meet people, and 3 days you're going to be enjoying yourself on vacation or something. You need to split it, personal versus business, okay? So it all depends on what the logic of that expenses is.
Makes a ton of sense there. Specific question here. You mentioned that certain countries do have different ways that they view US tax filings, or even how that tax filing is interpreted in the home country. Can you explain the process of paying taxes for an LLC if you're an Indian resident?
Well, that's basically telling me to explain the Indian law. I'm not an Indian expert, so I cannot explain the Indian law. But this is where you need an Indian professional to tell you how the India views US LLCs, okay? The US tax code is very convoluted. I don't even know everything about the US tax code. There are certain things that are so, complicated. So I will not go into other countries' tax code. So all that I focus on is to be good at the US side. So if you have any questions on India, you should consult an India chartered accountant or CPA to help you out.
No, look, and I think as folks can tell, I would say I would want to work with a professional, whether it's law, tax, or whatever, who is going to tell you straight up what they can and can't do. And right. I think I appreciate that here. I think folks should appreciate that too. If it's something which you don't feel, as you said earlier, whether it's a paid or a free consultation, if it's something you don't feel like you can describe accurately, you won't do it, and you'll give folks that candid advice, which I think is great.
That's correct, yeah.
Another question here. Is a single member foreign-owned US LLC liable to pay FICA taxes at 15.3%?
Is it a US person or foreign person?
Foreign person.
A foreign person does not pay FICA taxes. FICA taxes now we have to
And if you
tell
could
you what
define,
FICA is.
yeah, thank you. Okay.
FICA is Social Security and Medicare. Okay, this is the kind of taxes U.S. residents and citizens and resident aliens pays into a U.S. tax system, so that when they grow old and they cannot work anymore, they can, get into that system and get paid. So it's basically like pension. Why would a non-resident be paying into a U.S. pension when they don't have any, they don't have any intentions of staying here in the U.S. or even, things like that. So non-resident aliens do not pay FICA taxes as long as the work is not being performed in the U.S.
Okay, pretty straightforward question there. I was pretty straightforward answer there, but I think this is where there's so many different, different types of taxes. And I personally actually didn't even know what FICA was. So I was asking for myself to define that too. But yeah, there we go. So
it could be a different situation for those on F1 if you're receiving wages from outside the school and everything. But even with F1, during the period you're on F1, you can tell your employer that you're not subject to, self-employment taxes, and they would actually not take any self-employment taxes as long as you continue to be a non-resident.
Great. Follow-up question here to the travel expenses / deduction topic. Let's say you have to make a business expense and you end up doing it with your personal credit card. In this case, the person's based in Mexico. If you have on the invoice the name of your LLC, can you then transfer that amount from your business account to your personal account? Or what do you do if you ever accidentally make a business expense on a personal card, or vice versa, a personal expense on a business card?
I mean, it is what it is. The truth is the truth. You use your personal funds to support the business, so it gets recorded as such. What I would say is that, I know that this is a very, very genuine question and it happens, but I try to tell business owners to stay away from using personal stuff for, business. Like it doesn't help anyone, because when you're audited, now you're broadening the scope, and it confuses the auditor as to what is really business and what is personal, because you're mingling. But assuming you fall into that situation, it's still business expense, because when we go into the fact and circumstances, we know that, maybe it was due to inconvenience, or you could not have used that bank account because there's some restrictions and all of that, and you had to pay this really bad. And so you paid it with your personal. So most people would do, like, if it's a single member LLC, they would do a general entry in their books, and they would increase their expenses, and then they will increase their equity, right? So you would do owner's contribution, you credit owner's contribution, and then you debit the kind of expenses you had. And then that basically takes care of everything on the company side.
Okay, awesome. So again, this is where mistakes can happen, but I think in this case, like, to avoid the mistake if possible, just completely. And this is one of the biggest reasons we tell folks why the benefit of starting a business is to separate personal from business, so this doesn't even happen in the first place.
Right.
Cool. One last question here, and I'll read it out here. I'm a copywriter and a digital marketer. I do all of the work by myself, and I'm a non-US resident. My fiance will soon start offering services with me. He's in the final stages of his US residency approval status. I would like to register a US business to collect payments in the US and access US business services, facilities, and products. Should I register as a sole trader on my name alone, or a multiple member LLC to include him being the fiance?
So the fiance is the one that's doing the US residency stuff?
Correct.
Okay. And so he has an option of being a sole trader or going into partnership with a US person.
Looks like it. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So why would we have to complicate things when there's an easy way out, which is to be, if you're a foreign person, you can be a single member LLC and decide and not have to pay taxes at all, right? And then there's the complicated side where you, the foreign person, is joining in partnership with a US person to be in a partnership. that gets complicated because now you have a partnership and some part of the activities that's bringing in the income have to be imputed or have to be assigned to the US because, if your partner is also here in the US, it is assumed that part of the activities takes place in the US and you have an agent here in the US. The agent is your partner who is in the US. So you cannot say that 100% of your income is foreign source. It's definitely not foreign source because your other partner is also in the US who is also contributing to the business. So at the end of the year, we have to do a very complicated math or analysis and figure out what percentage of the income we need to assign to the US and pay taxes on versus what needs to be assigned to a foreign country, right? So in cases where you have a mixture of US person and foreign person, I usually advise them, to set up a corporation because with a corporation, you can decide, the foreign person can decide that, look, I'm going to work for this company and I'm going to take this amount as my salary, provided they all agreed on, and if the salary is reasonable, then, the foreign person has really predetermined how much he wants to take and what he doesn't want to pay taxes on, because then it boils back to you, the foreign person, working for the corporation and receiving a reasonable compensation. And when that compensation is due to work performed abroad, then that income is not taxable. And so you, the foreign person, takes it and run with it, right? But when you have a multiple member LLC, now you fall into a situation where you have to figure out how much to assign to the US. And then also there has to be a withholding. You have to withhold on the foreign partners on every quarterly basis and report it to the IRS. So I guess our work is to explain the alternatives and give it all to the taxpayer and what they want to do.
Awesome. Well, we are at the top of the half hour here. So here's what we'll do is, and by the way, the question you just answered, the person who asked said, "My God, this is so helpful. Thank you." And I think so thank you, Alex, and very appreciated person there.
No
but
problem.
I think for everyone here, I hope this was incredibly helpful. I learned a ton, and I've spent not as much time as Alex on this, but I've spent a good amount of time learning, and I still learn new things every time, especially when I chat with Alex. So Alex, thank you so much. To wrap up, how can folks find you? What's the best way to contact you? When should they contact you? How should they? I strongly recommend working with Alex. I have had a fantastic relationship so far. So why don't you leave some info?
So let me share my screen real quick, and then maybe visually will help clients to figure out how to find me. So this is my website, ongaccounting.com, and this is. Do you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it, so we're good.
You can see, okay, good.
Yep.
So, it's the easy way to find me. You could Google foreign-owned US LLC, and, the first article that shows up is mine, the 7 common questions about foreign-owned US LLCs, and then you can find me there. And when you go on there too, under the article, there's a lot of videos I have recorded on some of your issues, and I also have some success stories where, we've been able to help people apply the treaty correctly or save some people taxes. So recently we actually helped someone, for the IRS to wipe off a $210,000 penalty. Taxes that was incorrectly owed. So we did that. And then also when you go to my website, you could also see that I've been published on so many publications. I've been published on Bloomberg, Denver Post, US News, all of those places. So when you go, you can check me out, and then you could also shoot me a message anytime. And remember, paid appointment is always important for me, and that kind of fosters a good relationship between us. Okay.
Awesome. So you heard it here. You can Google, and you can either Google a common term and you'll stumble upon Alex, or go straight to his website.
Yeah, just type Alex Oware, and I'm
Awesome.
all over the place. You will see my articles, my news publications, and all of that. You're good.
Sweet. Well, hey, everyone, we're going to be doing more of these tax masterclass webinars going forward. Might even have to see Alex as a little sneak peek. I know you're very busy, but there's a lot more questions and topics we probably could have dived into. So maybe we'll see if we can do another one. But Thank you everyone for tuning in today from really all around the world. And if you or a friend weren't able to fully watch the entire webinar, it will be available on our YouTube. So you can always watch it, share it with a friend. And if you, again, need any help, you got Alex's contact info. And then as always, if you have questions about launching, growing, and maintaining your US LLC, you can check out doola.com too. So Alex, thanks a ton. I know you're probably busy now. You have law school going on, and as tax season comes around, you'll be even busier. So maybe we actually do a class on task management or personal time management in the future, because I am curious how you do it all.
I don't know how I do it either, but I guess we still have to power on. We care for our customers, so we'll see how it goes in the nearest future. So we'll see. All right. Well, thank you very much and for having me, and thanks for everyone that joined also. We appreciate you all. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye.